Before we begin, viewer discretion is strongly advised. The following is for educational and entertainment purposes only. This is the verbatim federal courtroom testimony of the Sean Diddy Combs trial as reported by Inner City Press. What's in Rachel Zegler's testimony that's pushing Diddy to the brink of complete emotional collapse? And why has Disney's rising star risked her entire career to reveal connections between the entertainment giant and one of music's most powerful figures? In a federal courtroom where Sean Diddy Combs faces grave accusations, Rachel Zegler made an unexpected entrance. Not as a celebrity, not as Disney's newest princess, but as a witness with documents, recordings, and first-hand accounts of a system designed to connect young talent with powerful industry players under the guise of mentorship opportunities. And then a bombshell of testimony about Disney's alleged talent pipeline connected directly to Diddy's infamous parties. As Zegler detailed the coded language and private communications between certain Disney executives and Diddy's team, the music mogul visibly crumbled, slamming his fist on the table before burying his face in his hands, shoulders heaving as he broke down completely. Why would Rachel Zegler dare to testify knowing she could lose everything she's worked for? And what remains hidden behind the family-friendly image of Disney and the glamorous facade of Diddy's music empire? This isn't just a seismic revelation that threatens to expose how deeply the corruption runs in the entertainment industry, connecting seemingly separate worlds through a shared system of exploitation and silence. The full story, raw, unfiltered, begins with Rachel Zegler's testimony, and what she's revealed will ensure you never see Hollywood the same way again. If you want to stay informed about this developing story, make sure to like and subscribe for the latest updates as this unprecedented case continues to unfold. I'm standing in front of the Manhattan Federal Courthouse where one of the most shocking TRRs in entertainment history has taken yet another unexpected turn. The atmosphere today was electric, charged with tension unlike anything witnessed since the proceedings began. Nobody expected Rachel Zegler. The room was tense, eyes focused on the prosecution team until the side door opened. Gasps echoed throughout the courtroom. Even the judge froze momentarily. No announcement, no pre-written statement, just Rachel Zegler walking in with measured steps, her face composed but pale. Hands clasped tightly in front of her. Until that moment, Diddy had maintained a carefully constructed facade throughout the trial. But something had changed. Maybe it was seeing the face of Disney's newest star in this context. Maybe it was knowing what evidence she possessed. Maybe it was realizing that the walls between different sectors of entertainment were crumbling. Whatever it was, Diddy was visibly shaken. His usual confident demeanor fracturing before our eyes. Rachel wasn't there as an actress or a singer. She was there as a witness who had observed troubling patterns and connections since her entry into Hollywood's upper echelons, and when she began to speak, her voice clear despite the palpable tension. The courtroom wasn't prepared for what they would hear because what Rachel Zegler revealed about the private events, the special auditions, and the connection between Disney's talent development programs and Diddy's entertainment ventures wasn't just explosive. It was a systematic exposure of an industry-wide network that few had dared to acknowledge publicly. "I'm here today," Rachel began, her voice steady despite the weight of the moment. "Because I believe the public deserves to know how certain systems operate within the entertainment industry, systems that connect companies with family-friendly images to individuals with troubling histories." The judge leaned forward. Diddy's attorneys exchanged alarmed glances, and Diddy himself seemed to shrink in his chair as the young actress's words filled the silent courtroom. "This isn't about one person or one company," Rachel continued. "This is about a network that operates across entertainment sectors, putting young talent in vulnerable positions while maintaining plausible deniability." As she spoke, court officers distributed sealed evidence packets to the jury. When they opened them, several jurors visibly recoiled. One older man removed his glasses, rubbing his eyes as if trying to unsee the contents. Another juror looked directly at Diddy, her expression hardening from uncertainty to disgust. Rachel Zegler's testimony was about to take the case in a direction no one had anticipated, least of all Sean Diddy Combs, whose carefully constructed world now teetered on the edge of complete collapse. It started like any other day of the trial. The room buzzed with low conversations. The press hunched in their designated rows and lawyers whispered strategies as they waited for the prosecution to call their next scheduled witness. Former executive. Assistant who had worked at one of Diddy's companies. But when the prosecutor instead announced, "The people call Rachel Zegler," the room changed. You could hear a pin drop. Some people thought it was a mistake. Others thought it was a publicity stunt. But the way Rachel walked to the stand, her gaze unwavering despite her youth, told everyone this was very real. The judge raised an eyebrow and Diddy, who'd been whispering with his defense team, suddenly looked up sharply, his expression shifting from confusion to dawning horror. Rachel took the oath. No eye contact with anyone. She didn't even glance at Diddy. "Miss Zegler, thank you for appearing today," the prosecutor began. "I understand this wasn't an easy decision." Rachel adjusted the microphone slightly. "I'm here because it's necessary." The judge allowed it. And from that moment on, the entire trial shifted because what Rachel was about to say wasn't part of any media narrative. It wasn't a social media leak. It was something that connected seemingly separate worlds in ways that had been carefully concealed for years. Rachel testified that her introduction to Hollywood's inner workings began when she was cast as Maria in Steven Spielberg's West Side Story, her first major role that catapulted her from high school productions to the global stage. "The transition was overwhelming," she explained. "You go from being a normal teenager to suddenly having access to the highest levels of the entertainment industry. Everyone wants to meet you, mentor you, guide your career." This led to what she described as welcome parties for new talent events, hosted by various entertainment companies to introduce rising stars to industry veterans. "These are presented as networking opportunities," Rachel clarified. "Essential for building the relationships you need to sustain a career. Attendance isn't explicitly mandatory, but it's made clear that those who participate tend to find more opportunities." It was at one such event in late 2021 Rachel testified that she first noticed the connection between Disney executives and Diddy's team. There was a private room within the main event, invitation only. "I was approached by a talent coordinator who said that special mentors wanted to meet with me to discuss potential collaborations outside my Disney contract." Rachel described how she was initially excited by the opportunity but became uncomfortable when she realized the meeting would take place at a separate location after the main event. "I called my agent who advised me not to go. He didn't explain why, just said I should claim illness and leave early." Curious about what she had narrowly avoided, Rachel began paying closer attention to the patterns around these events. She noticed certain young actors who attended these special mentorship meetings often returned with inexplicable career boosts, coveted roles, music deals, fashion contracts, while others who attended seemed to withdraw from public life entirely. "I started keeping notes," Rachel said, names, dates, who extended these invitations, which executives were consistently present when these connections were made. It wasn't just Disney. It was across studios, labels, and agencies. But there was a clear pattern involving certain powerful figures who seemed to operate as gatekeepers. The most disturbing revelation came when Rachel described receiving a message directly from Diddy after she declined a second invitation. It wasn't threatening. It was actually very polite, which made it more unsettling. He wrote that he understood my hesitation as a newcomer to our family, but that doors only stay open for so long, and that loyalty is remembered in this business. Rachel testified that she shared these concerns with an older actress who had mentored her, whose name was redacted in court for her protection. She wasn't surprised. "She told me this had been happening for decades, just with different players." She called it the talent pipeline, identifying, promising young artists and filtering them through a system of development that could either elevate or destroy them. The court fell completely silent as Rachel described finding a document accidentally left behind after a meeting with marketing exec spreadsheet listing young Disney talent with notations about their potential, compliance level, and special event suitability. "My name was on that list," Rachel said, her voice finally showing a slight tremor along with a note that I was resistant to external guidance and should be limited to core Disney projects until attitude adjustment. When Rachel reported this to a trusted producer, she discovered something even more troubling. Similar systems existed throughout the entertainment industry, with Diddy allegedly serving as one of the central connection points between the music world and Hollywood. It wasn't just about parties, Rachel explained. It was about creating a system where young talent understood that their future depended on participating in events and relationships outside the public eye. Those who played along were rewarded. Those who didn't faced subtle but effective barriers. As Rachel's testimony continued, court reporters described Diddy's demeanor changing dramatically from initial dismissiveness to growing agitation as she revealed specific dates, locations, and communications that aligned perfectly with evidence already entered into the record from other witnesses. The connection she was establishing between Disney's supposedly wholesome talent development programs and Diddy's now infamous parties was becoming impossible to ignore, a pipeline hiding in plain sight, protected by powerful interests across entertainment sectors. "I've kept a lot inside for a long time," Rachel said, her voice growing stronger as she continued. "I've starred in major films. I've worked with legendary directors. I've achieved dreams I had since childhood, but none of that matters when you witness a system designed to exploit other dreamers who don't have protection." She turned slightly toward Diddy. "You were the connection point," Rachel told the courtroom. That it started, like many Hollywood stories do, with what seemed like a golden opportunity. It came through her management team. The way they framed it, it was supposed to be a chance to expand beyond Disney's family-friendly constraints and establish herself as a serious artist with range. They said there would be producers from the music industry, influential directors, people who could help diversify my career beyond the Disney princess image. It sounded like a legitimate professional opportunity. But the moment Rachel arrived at the Beverly Hills hotel suite where the meeting was to take place, she knew something was off. The security was extensive, men in suits with earpieces checking names against a list, collecting phones. The level of privacy seemed excessive for what was described as an industry mixer. They said it was to protect high-profile attendees, but it felt controlling rather than protective. Rachel was escorted through the main reception area to a more private section of the suite. The atmosphere was strange, drinks flowing freely despite many attendees being underage. Conversations that stopped abruptly when certain people approached. And most notably several young Disney stars who seemed uncomfortable but were being enthusiastically introduced to Diddy and his associates. Rachel said that after about 40 minutes of observation, Diddy approached her directly. He said something like, "Our mutual friends think you're going to be very important to both our worlds. I can open doors that even Disney can't." And he smiled. That smile, it wasn't warmth. It was assessment. "He took me aside away from the main group." Rachel continued, "He started talking about crossing over between film and music. How he'd helped establish many successful dual career artists. Then he said something that truly alarmed me. The contracts they have you under are restrictive, but there are ways to work around those limitations if you're with the right team." Rachel followed up on this comment later by speaking with a Disney legal consultant who confirmed that such arrangements would indeed violate her contract terms. "That's when I realized this wasn't about legitimate career opportunities. It was about creating leverage, getting young artists to participate in projects or activities that violated their primary contracts. Then using that violation as control." Rachel paused, swallowing hard. "I didn't know how to address what I was seeing. And that's exactly how the system works. Once you're in those rooms, you're already compromised just by being there." Rachel continued, her voice steady but measured. A few weeks after that first event, she received an invitation to what was described as a small dinner with Diddy and several Disney executives to discuss a potential music collaboration. Her instincts told her to decline, but her management strongly encouraged her attendance, suggesting that refusing might affect her standing with Disney. "I went, but I took precautions," she testified. "I told multiple trusted friends where I was going. I set up emergency calls, and I wore a small recording device, not because I planned to expose anyone, but because I wanted protection. What? Rachel recorded that night became a key piece of evidence in the current case. The prosecution played a brief excerpt in which Diddy could be heard clearly discussing how certain Disney contracts could be managed and how young talent needed to show commitment to the larger family before certain opportunities would become available. Most damning was a portion where Diddy allegedly told a Disney executive the girl from the Snow movie, "Is she ready for real development yet, or still playing princess? We're focusing on the more adaptable ones first." Rachel testified that the fear she felt in that moment was unlike anything she'd experienced. "I realized they were discussing my colleague's other young actress as commodities to be evaluated and processed through the system." The recording continued with discussions of private parties where select Disney talent would be introduced to Diddy's close associates from the music and fashion worlds. There were references to documenting commitment and ensuring mutual protection that prosecutors suggested were coded references to the blackmail materials detailed in earlier testimony. When asked by prosecutors why she decided to come forward with this evidence, Rachel's response was direct. "Because I watched what happened to those who participated in this system. Some disappeared from the industry entirely. Others suddenly developed substance issues or erratic behavior that damaged their reputations. And some got exactly what was promised: crossover opportunities, music deals, fashion contracts, but the light in their eyes was gone. Whatever they'd experienced had changed them." The prosecutor approached with a sealed evidence bag. "Ms. Zegler, is this the recording device you used on the night of March 12, 2022 at the meeting between Mr. Holmes and Disney executives at the Chateau Marmont?" Rachel identified it. The small device, disguised as a designer brooch, had captured nearly 3 hours of conversations that prosecutors claimed provided the missing link between Diddy's operation and mainstream entertainment companies. And on this recording, the prosecutor continued, "Is this where Mr. Combs discusses what he calls the development pipeline and how Disney talent is evaluated for what he terms additional opportunities?" Rachel looked directly at Diddy for the first time. "Yes, that's where he explains how they identify which young actors are vulnerable to manipulation and which ones should be, his words, kept in the Disney bubble because they aren't right for our program." The prosecutor turned to the judge. "Your Honor, we'd like to play excerpt B23 for the court." And that's when Diddy broke down. Rachel said she observed Diddy interact with Disney executives in a suite at the Chateau Marmont, thinking they were discussing legitimate cross-promotional opportunities. Instead, what she witnessed shook her understanding of how the entertainment industry truly operated. There were casual references to young talent as prospects and investments. Some I recognized as rising Disney stars were categorized as ready for advancement or requiring more preparation. There were comments about who had potential beyond the family-friendly space and who needed loyalty testing before further opportunities. And Diddy, he operated as what they called a transition specialist, someone who could guide young performers from Disney's controlled environment into the broader industry while keeping them protected and aligned. Rachel paused, straightening in her chair. The language was deliberately vague, but the meaning became clearer as the night progressed. This wasn't about professional development. It was about identifying which young performers could be safely brought into this other system. Rachel continued, her voice unwavering. A few days after that meeting, she received a text from an unknown number. All it said was, "Your commitment to career growth is noted. Discretion is the first quality we look for in future collaborators." Then a black car emoji. She thought it might be a standard industry warning until an unmarked package arrived at her apartment tan address that wasn't publicly listed. It contained a USB drive. I almost didn't look, but I did. It contained photos of me entering the Chateau Marmont that night along with what appeared to be a contract for a music development deal, not with Disney Records, but with a subsidiary of Diddy's business empire. The terms included clauses about private performance obligations and exclusive development sessions that were vaguely worded but clearly inappropriate. There was a note attached that said, "Ready when you are." The family welcomed serious artists. Rachel testified that the implications were clear. I was being shown that I could have a music career alongside my Disney contracts if I agreed to participate in whatever these private performances entailed. The contract was designed to look legitimate on the surface while containing clauses that could be interpreted in deeply concerning ways. The recording Rachel had secretly made that night, the one now entered into evidence, captured Diddy explaining his methodology to the Disney executives present. "You have the perfect setup," Diddy's voice said clearly on the recording. "Come to you young hungry parents all excited about Disney. You established the foundation, the clean image. We handle the transition to adult careers. It's about managing expectations. There's the public's, everyone's. The ones who understand the exchange succeed, the difficult ones. Well, there's always someone new coming through the pipeline." The recording continued with a Disney executive asking about a specific young actress who had recently experienced a very public breakdown after leaving the Disney system. Diddy's response was chilling. She didn't understand the program. Thought she could take the opportunities without the obligations. Started talking too much, asking the wrong questions. Had to be managed. Sometimes a public breakdown is the cleanest way to handle flight risks. When asked by prosecutors why she didn't immediately report what she had discovered, Rachel's answer reflected the reality many young performers face. "Who would I tell?" The executives involved represented the most powerful entertainment companies in the world. My management team was clearly complicit. The police would see a contract that, while exploitative, was crafted by expert lawyers to appear just barely legal, and coming forward would mean the end of my career before it truly began. Rachel described how after that night, she began noticing patterns in how young Disney stars transitioned to adult careers. There were two clear paths. Those who participated in what I now understood to be Diddy's development program received music deals, fashion campaigns, and film roles outside the Disney ecosystem, but often developed concerning behaviors or relationships. Those who stayed exclusively within Disney's approved pathways had more limited opportunities, but fewer public struggles. The pattern became clear. Diddy wasn't just running his own operation. According to Rachel's testimony and recordings, he was serving as a bridge between the controlled family-friendly Disney environment and the more adult entertainment world, filtering young talent through a system that gave both sides plausible deniability while creating perfect conditions for exploitation. The most disturbing revelation came when Rachel described a conversation she overheard between Diddy and a senior Disney casting director. They were discussing upcoming projects and which young performers might be ready to graduate from Disney. The casting director had a list actual names of teenagers and young adults currently under Disney contracts. Next to each name were notes like family involvement, too high, management aligned, or financial pressure point. They were assessing not just talent but vulnerability, who could be most easily transitioned into this other system. When Rachel saw her own name on the list, with the notation resistant but valuable reconsider approach, she knew she had to do something. That's when I started documenting everything systematically. Dates, names, verbatim quotes when possible. I needed undeniable evidence because I knew what I was uncovering connected some of the most powerful entities in entertainment. Rachel said that's when the pressure intensified. I started receiving more invitations to exclusive events. Each time I declined, there would be subtle consequences. A scheduled interview would be cancelled. A costume fitting would be repeatedly rescheduled. Suddenly, directors who had been enthusiastic about meeting me were unavailable. Rumors started circulating that I was difficult or not a team player. I knew what it was. It was pressure. Diddy and his Disney connections didn't need to threaten me directly. They just made it clear that cooperation opened doors while resistance closed them. And so for nearly a year, Rachel navigated this pressure while continuing to document what she observed. She focused on her contracted Disney work, avoided industry events when possible, and built relationships with people she trusted outside the mainstream Hollywood system. But every time I saw a young Disney star suddenly appear at one of Diddy's events or announce a surprising music collaboration, I wondered if they had understood what they were agreeing to or if they'd felt they had no choice. She looked around. The courtroom. This wasn't just about inappropriate parties. This was about a systematic approach to identifying, evaluating, and processing young talent through a pipeline that connected seemingly separate worlds of entertainment. And that, Rachel said, was what I finally realized needed to be exposed. Paused, glanced at the jury, and leaned closer to the mic. It wasn't just the recordings. That was just evidence of a system much larger than one man. She said from that moment on, every career decision she made felt loaded with potential consequences. She explained that communications would come through various channels connected to both Disney and Diddy's enterprises. Suggestions about attending certain events, recommendations to meet with specific producers, hints about expanding her brand beyond acting. When she would decline, subtle shifts would occur in her professional landscape. I'd turn down a dinner with one of Did's music producers, and the next week, I'd learn a magazine cover I'd been promised had been given to someone else, someone who had attended that dinner. Rachel said this didn't happen occasionally. It became a clear pattern. It wasn't just Diddy. It wasn't just Disney. It was a network that functioned across companies and industries. Agents, managers, executives, producers, many of them knowing only their small part in the larger machine, but some like Diddy fully aware of how the entire system operated. What finally pushed Rachel to her breaking point was learning about a young actress she had befriended during a Disney event, a girl who had been excited about new opportunities presented to her by the same executives connected to Diddy 3 months later. She was announced as the face of a new music and fashion collaboration with one of Diddy's companies. She called me distraught, saying she couldn't talk about what had happened, but that she was in too deep to walk away. A week after that, her parents were given executive producer credits on her next project and relocated to a new home in Calabasas. The message was clear. Everyone had their price, and those who couldn't be bought directly could be influenced through those around them. Rachel described gathering her evidence, the recordings, messages, emails, and detailed notes she'd kept and taken them first to an attorney unconnected to the major entertainment law firms, then to federal investigators who were already building their case. They asked if I understood what coming forward would mean for my career with Disney, for future opportunities in the industry. I said yes, because there are some things more important than personal success. The defense attorneys objected repeatedly throughout this testimony, claiming it was prejudicial based on hearsay or irrelevant to the specific charges against Diddy. Each time the judge overruled them, finding that the pattern of behavior and connections between businesses were directly relevant to establishing the methods of operation alleged in the indictment. As Rachel continued detailing the systematic way young talent was evaluated, isolated, and processed through what she called the pipeline, Diddy's composure visibly deteriorated. His typically confident posture gave way to slumped shoulders, his jaw clenched and unclenched. Several times he whispered urgently to his attorneys who appeared increasingly concerned. This wasn't the testimony of an anonymous source or a disgruntled former employee. This was Rachel Zegler, Disney's newest star, a critically acclaimed actress, methodically outlining a system of talent exploitation that allegedly connected one of America's most family-friendly companies with one of music's most controversial figures. Rachel's voice dropped to a quieter, more deliberate tone. I stayed silent for nearly 2 years. I convinced myself that documenting everything was enough, that someone with more power would eventually expose this system. But then I saw how quickly Cassie Ventura's abuse allegations were being minimized in the press, how the surveillance video was being questioned despite being clear evidence. She said the first time she saw the hotel footage of Diddy assaulting Cassie, she recognized the hotel corridor immediately. It was the same hotel where Disney had housed several young performers for a corporate event in 2019. The same hotel where Diddy had hosted what was described as a music industry mixer on the same weekend. That couldn't be coincidence. Rachel described feeling like everything suddenly connected. I didn't even know the federal investigation had advanced this far until I received a call not from my agent or Disney publicity, But from my independent, the attorney who had been holding my evidence, he said they're building a case that goes beyond Diddy, and your documentation could be crucial evidence of how the system operates across companies. Rachel said she stayed up all night considering the implications, the risks to her career, the Disney contracts that could be terminated, the industry blacklisting that would likely follow. But I also thought about the names on that list. I saw young people, some still teenagers, being evaluated for their usefulness in a system designed to exploit them. And I realized I couldn't live with myself if I stayed silent. She said the breaking point wasn't fear. It was responsibility. I realized that if I didn't speak now, my silence would become part of the problem. Every young performer entering this industry deserves to know what they're really stepping into. And every parent deserves to understand what development opportunities might actually mean. Rachel told the court she contacted federal prosecutors herself after conferring with her attorney. I told them, I have recordings. I have documentation. I have witnessed how this pipeline operates between companies that should have nothing to do with each other. She looked at the jury. This isn't just about parties or music or one man's behavior. This is about a calculated system that identifies vulnerable talent, isolates them from protection, and processes them through a pipeline that spans multiple entertainment sectors. Then she looked at Diddy directly, her expression resolute, and you were the connection point, the bridge between worlds that should have remained separate. The prosecutor approached with another sealed evidence bag. Ms. Zegler, is this the final document you obtained during your last official Disney meeting in April of this year? Rachel identified it. The document, which prosecutors had previously entered into evidence, contained what appeared to be an organizational chart showing relationships between various entertainment companies with Diddy's enterprises highlighted as what was labeled transition partnerships. And on this document, the prosecutor continued, is this where Disney executives specifically discussed their talent development relationship with Mr. Combs and his associates? Yes, Rachel replied. It outlines how certain performers would be approved for external development while others would remain within system only. It uses corporate language to describe what is essentially a sorting process which young talent could be safely channeled toward Diddy's operations without creating liability concerns. The courtroom fell completely silent as the prosecutor prepared to show the full document on the courtroom screens. Diddy's lead attorney rose to object, but before he could speak, something unexpected happened. Diddy himself stood up. Your Honor, he said, his voice unsteady. I need a moment with my attorneys. But as his legal team tried to huddle around him, Diddy suddenly slammed his fist on the table. This is all, he began loudly before his lawyer physically pulled him back into his seat, hand over his client's microphone. The judge immediately called for order, threatening to have Diddy removed if he couldn't control himself. Court-martials moved closer to the defense table. Diddy's attorneys managed to calm him enough to remain seated, but the damage was done. The composed, powerful figure had crumbled. Tears were visible on his face, and his hands trembled as he reached for a glass of water, spilling it across his notes. When order was restored, the prosecution displayed the organizational charter. Damning visualization of how young talent flowed between companies with Diddy's operations serving as a crucial nexus point in what was labeled in corporate euphemism as mature market talent development. As the document was explained to the jury, Rachel Zegler sat straight in the witness chair unflinching. Her testimony connecting final dots in the prosecution's case, dots that linked Diddy not just to his own alleged crimes but to a larger system that had operated across entertainment sectors for years, and Diddy, the man who had built an empire on his ability to control narratives, could no longer control his own emotions as the full scope of the evidence against him became clear for her. Final statement. The judge allowed Rachel to address her reasons for coming forward. She stood from the witness chair, her posture straight. Despite the weight of the moment, I entered this industry with dreams and hope, she began. I believed that talent, hard work, and integrity would be enough. What I discovered instead was a system built on leveraging those dreams, not just by one man, but by interconnected interests across entertainment sectors. Diddy didn't respond. He sat there seemingly defeated. His lawyer continued taking notes without looking up. Rachel continued without wavering. I saw how companies with family-friendly images could maintain plausible deniability while channeling young talent toward development opportunities that existed in shadows. I saw how carefully contracts were worded to appear legitimate while creating conditions for exploitation. I saw how those who participated were rewarded and those who resisted faced subtle but effective career obstacles. Then Rachel held up her Disney ID badge, still valid, though perhaps not for long after this testimony. This represents a dream for so many young performers. But behind that dream, for some, has been a pipeline designed to identify which new talent could be safely transitioned into systems of control and exploitation. That's what needed to be exposed, not just individual behavior, but the connections between worlds that publicly appear separate. Rachel turned to the jury. If you think this is just about parties or one man's actions, you're missing the true scope. This is about an ecosystem that is operated across company boundaries using corporate language and legitimate-seeming opportunities to disguise a process of evaluation, isolation, and control. And if we don't acknowledge the full system, it will simply rebuild around different players. Then she looked at Diddy one final time. You once told a room full of executives that the system works because everyone gets what they need. What you meant was that companies maintained clean images. You gained access to new talent and executives, received kickbacks and opportunities, all while young performers lost their agency and sometimes much more. Rachel returned to her seat, collected her belongings, and waited to be dismissed by the judge. And Diddy? He sat there pale and defeated, unblinking, his empire of influence visibly crumbling. Because for perhaps the first time in his career, he wasn't facing accusations he could charm, threaten, or buy his way out. If he was facing systematic evidence of how his operation connected to legitimate businesses in ways that could no longer be denied. When Rachel Zegler left the witness stand, she didn't look triumphant. She looked resolute, like someone who had made a necessary choice despite knowing its personal cost. The courtroom remained tense, processing the implications of testimony that went far beyond one defendant to implicate systems spanning the entertainment industry. Rachel didn't speak to the press when she exited. She didn't make statements or pose for cameras. She walked out of the courthouse flanked by federal marshals for her protection. Her future in the industry now uncertain, but her conscience clear. When asked later by a reporter if she regretted coming forward knowing it might end her Disney career, she reportedly responded, "Some costs are worth paying. Some silences are too destructive to maintain." But outside the courtroom, the entertainment world was only beginning to react. Disney executives called emergency meetings. Publicists worked overtime drafting careful statements. Law firms specializing in entertainment contracts suddenly found their phones ringing continuously. And while many industry insiders tried to downplay the connections Rachel had exposed, social media was already connecting dots that had been hiding in plain sight for years. Old interviews resurfaced showing Disney stars at Diddy's events, previous unexplained career trajectories were re-examined, and most tellingly, the pattern of young performers who had crossed between Disney and Diddy's projects before disappearing from public view or developing concerning behaviors suddenly appeared not as individual cases, but as potential evidence of a systematic process. Behind closed doors, crisis management teams were activated across multiple entertainment companies. Internal memos urged caution in communications and a review of talent development partnerships. And while many executives claimed shock and surprise, a growing chorus of former child stars began coming forward with their own experiences that aligned perfectly with the system. Rachel had described the public wasn't just shocked, they were furious. Furious that companies projecting family-friendly images could potentially be channeling young talent into exploitative situations. Furious that warnings from former child stars had been dismissed for decades as bitter or unstable. And furious that an entire industry had maintained a code of silence that protected the powerful at the expense of the vulnerable. The era of that silence was ending. And as more witnesses came forward in the days following Rachel's testimony, it became clear that this case wasn't just about Diddy. It was about pulling back the curtain on how the entertainment industry has really operated across companies, across sectors, and across decades. As this unprecedented story continues to develop, we'll bring you the latest updates on a case that's expanded far beyond its original scope to potentially redefine how the entertainment industry operates and how young talent is protected. Make sure to like and subscribe to stay informed as we follow this developing story that may forever change Hollywood, the music industry, and the systems that connect them. In the days following Rachel Zegler's bombshell testimony, the ripple effects have been felt throughout the entertainment world. Disney stock dropped nearly 7% in a single trading day as investors reacted to potential legal and reputational exposure. The company issued a carefully worded statement, denying any official relationship with Diddy's businesses while announcing a comprehensive review of all talent development programs and third-party partnerships. Meanwhile, 3 senior Disney executives named in Rachel's testimony have taken temporary leaves of absence pending internal investigations. Industry insiders report that similar reviews are quietly underway at other major studios and networks, suggesting the connections Rachel exposed may extend far beyond a single company. Perhaps most telling has been the reaction from former child stars across generations. In an unprecedented show of solidarity, over 30 former young performers from Disney, Nickelodeon, and other youth-focused entertainment companies have signed an open letter calling for congressional hearings into industry practices and the establishment of an independent oversight body with actual enforcement powers. Social media has been flooded with the hashtag #that pipeline as people share clips of past interviews where young stars tried to hint at troubling industry practices, but were laughed off or quickly silenced by publicists. Cultural critics are now re-examining decades of child star meltdowns through a new lens, not as individual failures, but as potential evidence of systematic exploitation and abandonment. As for Diddy himself, legal experts suggest Rachel's testimony may have transformed what began as a case focused on specific allegations into something much larger. Federal prosecutors have reportedly expanded their investigation to include potential RICO charges examining the entire network of businesses, executives, and facilitators that may have enabled exploitation across company boundaries. The question now isn't just whether Diddy will be convicted, but how many others might be implicated as the full scope of the pipeline is revealed. What began in a Manhattan courtroom with one witness's courage may end up rewriting the rules for an entire industry that has operated in shadows for far too long. We'll continue to bring you developments in this extraordinary case as they unfold. For now, one thing is certain.